when Lord Delamere was putting together that land commission, there was no African who was consulted in that process that gave away all these chunks of land. Lord Delamere played a big role in carving out chunks of land in this country. And those are what has caused the land challenges we have in Kenya.
Legally, is it okay to ask people to leave?
Kenya has a more superior passport to Britain, to Canada, and to the United States. Article 1(2) of Kenyan Constitution says the citizens, we the people, may exercise sovereignty either, and in the first instance, directly or through elected representatives. So in the first instance, the Constitution recognizes that we can exercise direct sovereignty. Me and the king, me and the queen.
We are equal.
We are equal. We are sovereigns.
But if then my passport is strong, how come there are places my passport can't take me?
We still suffer from that hangover of the 1963 Constitution, where we say the 1963 Constitution had all the powers on the president. Sovereignty was on the president. We have not understood how to exercise sovereignty.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of LNS, and I wanted to actually say welcome to the home of civic education, because you guys, the feedback that you've been giving us on our recent shows, especially on the big conservation lie. We also had a conversation on our indigenous seeds. We are having really awesome conversations, and we are featuring great people who are able to educate us, because you know that thing they said, if you want to hide something from an African, put it in a book. We found the books, and now we are reading the books, and now we are well educated. And I've always said, guys, we are the ones who are going to impact our society. And you know, the funny thing is, my guest today has authored a book dubbed The Trouble with Kenya. And guy, I feel like everyone is just asking that question, what's wrong with Kenya? And today he's going to be answering so many questions. And one of them that has really bothered me is, why do we have so many foreigners who get to live in such large tracts of lands while we have a lot of people here who are homeless? This is not a Zimbabwe conversation where I ask you, please chase them out or do whatever. It's because we really need to understand our country and get to understand, we as Kenyans, we as the citizens, where do we actually fit in? I'm about to let him introduce himself so that he can walk us through that and so many other things. But before I do that, I want you to know I see your feedback and I appreciate it. People are leaving feedback as long as these guys. You are writing paragraphs, and that only shows that you are really interested in what we are saying. And we have to be active participants of everything that is happening in our country. So I see you, I appreciate you, I thank you for subscribing. And of course, I want to say thank you so much to my team for always making sure that they pull up and they show up every single time. I've said you get to see me in front of this camera, but if I was to pan it, you would see it takes an entire village to be able to put this work together. So thank you so much, Team LNN. Even on those at management level, we really do appreciate you, and we thank you for making it easy for me also to be able to continue bringing you guys these conversations. And of course, now without further ado, please allow me to let my guest today introduce himself. Sir, good morning.
Morning, Lynn.
How are you?
I'm keeping well.
Yes, I know we are filming this in the morning, but
Sure.
It gets to air late in the evening and maybe in the morning in some other continents.
Right.
Really happy to have you here. How are you feeling?
Keeping well.
Yeah.
Of course, being here is a pleasant moment for me.
Yeah.
We're going to speak about, as you said, free-flowing conversation, and I'm happy to come and talk about the trouble with Kenya.
Good.
Mackenziean blueprint. Mackenziean
blueprint.
Right.
I'm happy to have you here.
Thank
Maybe
you.
before we dive deep into this conversation, anyone who is tuning in and maybe they've not seen you somewhere, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Lawi Sultan Jeremani. I'm a Kenyan. I author books. I've authored The Trouble with Kenya, Mackenziean Blueprint. On other occasions, you'll find me working out in the field, out in the sun. I do agronomy for golf courses and sports fields. And aside from that, I also do a little bit of consulting.
Okay.
So in summary, that's who Lawi Sultan Jeremani is. Right.
You know, I think it's hitting me now. I'm a Kenyan,
Right.
And I think it comes with a lot of weight because we just used to say I'm a Kenyan, but now it involves you really digging deeper and
Right.
asking yourself, how can I be able to protect the country that raises me? How can I be able to make sure that the generation that comes can be able to, you know, the way we say I'm proudly Kenyan, they can be able to say I'm also proudly Kenyan. First and foremost for you, what does it mean to be Kenyan?
Right. And I'm glad you asked that question, because one of the things that I usually ask many people that I meet is, what is your nationality? What makes you Kenyan? For example, out on the street, what makes you Kenyan? Usually these are the kind of answers I get. One, my national ID. I was born here. My passport, especially when you meet people in diaspora. And I always ask the question, if those were taken away from you, because those are extrinsic manifestations of your nationality, if those were taken away from you, would you be Kenyan? And most of the times you come to the conclusion that likely not, because someone goes to the United States. And what makes them Kenyan? Because they quickly adapt the American accent. They quickly adapt the American lifestyle. And then you start asking yourself, what then makes us who we call ourselves Kenyan? It's a progressive discussion. And I believe that even as we continue the discussion, it will emerge and we'll start asking ourselves, is this what we are?
The way you've titled your book, and I know we're about to get there, The Trouble with Kenya, as I said, is something so many people are asking themselves. Hata mimi najiuliza, manze, ni nini mbaya na nchi yetu? Why is it that you put this cap and this cap here? This should make sense.
Right.
But why is it such a long journey for us to move from there to here? Why are there so many obstacles on the way, right? This is the time I let you walk us through what was in your mind when you were authoring this book, and just tell us exactly what is the trouble with Kenya.
Right. So thank you for that opportunity. There's something I had forgotten to come with. I don't know if anyone on set has 100 shilling note, a 200 shilling note, and a 50 shilling note. So if you were to take these 100 shilling notes, hold it up to the light.
You hold it there.
There you go.
Good.
All right. So do you see the watermarks in it?
Yes.
The security features in it?
Yes.
All right. So while you're holding that, let me add, as you're holding it to the light, let me add something on top.
Okay.
Hold those two now.
I hold these two now.
So tell us if you can see the watermark from the 100 shilling note.
Yeah.
You can see it?
Yes.
All right. Can you see the 200 watermark on the 200 shilling note?
No.
You cannot?
No, I cannot.
Okay. So if you remove the 100 shilling note, can you see the watermarks on the 200 shilling note?
I gotta make sure I'm seeing what I'm seeing.
All
yes,
right.
I can see
You
on
can
the
see
200 note.
All right. So, okay, thank you. I think that's a good starting point.
Okay, should I keep this in my...
You can. I'm sure they will know where to get you.
Where to find me.
So the point I'm trying to make there is that we have, in the Kenyan society, we have the 100 shilling note. If you put it up, you see the watermark. And then we have layered things on top. If we had a 50 shilling note, we would have added it on top of that, 1,000 and all that. Essentially what will happen is that we obscure the watermark that you saw in the first instance. It was very clear to you. But as we continue layering the notes, you discover that you can hardly tell what was there in the first instance. So when we are crafting or putting together the nation, in the first instance, things are very clear. But when we continue adding on to things here and there, if it's a constitution, we start adding amendments and other things on top of it, the initial essence is lost. And what was there initially becomes obscured. The trouble with Kenya is a problem of citizenry. Because in 2010, we got a new constitution. And I believe yesterday was the anniversary.
Yes.
And I was surprised that, and I was even asking in certain forums that I'm in, how comes the anniversary of the Constitution was not a public holiday, while Moi Day, for example, is a public holiday? The trouble with Kenya is that we as a citizenry have not taken in that we have a very empowering constitution, and it is upon us to make it work, not leave it to the politicians as we do to make it work for us. It will never do. It will never work that way, because the politicians will always agitate for what is for them, not what is for the citizens.
We did not even celebrate our constitution anniversary. At all.
Right.
All right. Few things you're very outspoken about, and I thought we could use your help. Okay. There is an emerging conversation right now, and I love that Kenyans have started asking themselves those questions, right?
Right.
No, I don't want to go to the passport one, because I really want to know how our passport is more stronger than the American passport.
Sure.
I always thought we were inferior.
Okay.
But let's start with the land.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
The land is ours, but is it really ours?
Is it really?
Is it really ours?
Yep. That's a good question. Where do we start? Do we start in 1884 or do we start in 1905?
Start where you think we need to start.
Start where we need to start. Land. This land we call Kenya, and probably as I started in the 1st century or 4th century. So I move closer in time, and I jump to the period when we have someone called the Sultan of Zanzibar. So the Sultan of Zanzibar, or at least the Said of the time, moves his capital from Oman to Zanzibar. And when he moves his capital there, then the locals, or the Waswahili, Said, as the Sultan of Zanzibar, was then approached by the elders of the Swahili, who said, we need your protection. We are always getting invaded by the Portuguese, by the Turks, by Iranians. And we need your protection so that with your presence here and with your war machines, because the Omanis were well known to be good sailors, you'll be able to provide us the security we need. So we come before you, placing in trust our lands, our faith before you. And that is how the Sultan then took dominion over those lands at the coastal area. It was not by fighting the locals. The locals approached the Sultan. We are under your protection. So the locals collectively ceded sovereignty to the Sultan. Now, let's move forward. There's something called the Mazrui rebellion, or the Mazrui uprising. The Mazruis were then, or a little bit of history, the Mazruis were the representatives of the Sultan in the coastal area of Kenya, because the Sultan was all the way in Zanzibar. So they became his liwalis. The liwali is a governor. In fact, I see that today we call governor in Swahili governor as a G-A-V-A-N-A, governor. There you go. But the actual term that we actually should be using is liwali. Liwali means you are representative of someone. So you are the liwali of Mombasa. Sakaja is the liwali of Nairobi, representing someone. Now, in the past, you are Diwali representing the Sultan. But today, people seem to have taken on the notion that the governor governs on whose authority. And that is the question I want us to also think about, because you're governing on behalf of the sovereigns. And the president is governing or leading executive arm of government on behalf of, and who are the sovereigns? We, the people. In fact, we're still on land, but since you brought the sovereignty, do you mind if we jump into sovereignty and then come back to land?
Let's jump.
Let's jump, sure. So I always ask this question. Who is the sovereign of Britain?
See, they are citizens.
They are citizens.
Yes.
Who is the sovereign of Canada?
They are citizens.
They are citizens. Who is the sovereign of the United States of America?
They are citizens.
Who is the sovereign of Kenya?
Us, the citizens.
We, the people. So let me give you, you got 2 out of 4.
No way! No! Okay, no.
Okay, you got 50%.
Oh, no. Britain is the monarchy.
There you go.
Yeah, the
so
monarchy.
I give you one more point.
Okay.
Who is the sovereign of Canada?
That's Muga.
Prime Minister. Okay, anyone else?
Take it away.
Take it away. So 3 out of 4 is good. 75%.
Yes.
So Britain, the sovereign is King Charles.
Yes.
In Canada, and I've always asked Canadians the same question, and many of them were surprised when I gave them the answer, which tells me they do not know who their sovereign is. The sovereign of Canada is King Charles. Previously, it was the Queen, but the monarch of England is the sovereign of Canada as well.
Aye.
So not even the Prime Minister. So Britain has the King, King Charles. Canada has
The
King. America has
the citizens.
citizens. Kenya have
Citizens.
citizens. Now, I say that Kenya has a more superior passport to Britain, to Canada, and to the United States. The fact that we already have we, the people, means we have eliminated Britain and Canada from this equation. So let's look at America. And I pose that Kenya has a superior passport to the Americans. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes. Why?
We.
We. They also have we in the preamble of their constitution. We, the people.
America now.
Yes. And we also borrowed from that. But I'm saying that Kenya has a superior passport to America for this reason, that in America, the citizens exercise their sovereignty through the executive arm, judiciary, legislature, Congress, and Senate, and also the agencies established, FBI,
CIA.
and all those. Those are the agencies, including health and all others.
Yes.
The American citizen cannot exercise direct sovereignty. Article 1(2) of Kenyan Constitution says the citizens, we the people, may exercise sovereignty either, and in the first instance, directly or through elected representatives. So in the first instance, the Constitution recognizes that we can exercise direct sovereignty.
For people who might not
Go
understand sovereignty,
Right.
what's sovereignty?
What is sovereignty? Simply put, and I'll borrow from the example of the Sultan of Zanzibar, and I'll also borrow from the king. So the Sultan of Zanzibar could declare, Lynn, I've given you 4,000 acres in Njoro, and it becomes your land by decree of the Sultan. The land of England is owned wholly
By the...
by the king or queen,
Yes.
depending on who it is. That is sovereignty. That's why Queen Victoria was able to grant a charter to the British East Africa Company to come and make an East African protectorate. Make this area of East Africa a protectorate of the Queen. That is sovereignty. That you can decree something and it becomes. I don't know if...
Good.
I've
Now,
used-
you've
Go ahead.
used, so in short, can I decree Ruto must go and he goes?
Certainly.
See, the Constitution
Right.
allows me.
Right.
See, no, I'm just saying, I'm using it as an example.
Yes.
Because that's what people are saying.
Right.
So me as an individual, can I say Ruto must go and he goes?
And he goes. Certainly. Now, here is where the difference comes. That you're exercising your sovereignty collectively. That you're a sovereign, yes, but you're exercising it collectively. So you must have a collective of a huge number like you saying Ruto must go for it to be actualized. A majority of you coming together. That's why the Constitution of Kenya today that we promulgated in August of 2010 was supported by 68% of the electorate. 31% did not support it. They're still with us. But it is the Constitution that governs all of us.
Okay.
Right.
Fair enough.
So you exercise it collectively. Right.
All right. But if then my passport is strong, how come there are places my passport can't take me?
Right. So we are still, and that's the point I was coming to. We are still in the throes of the 1963 Constitution. And I'll use this example. You've seen instances where a horse is always tethered to a post. And then even if you bring that horse to that post and forget to tether it,
It won't leave that
it won't
place.
leave that post because it knows this has restrained me. You may even have a horse that is so used to being led by the reins that all you need to do is put your hand up like this and start walking, and you'll find that horse is walking with you. That is an example of what the 1963 Constitution has done to us. We still live in those, or let me use the term, we still suffer from that hangover of the 1963 Constitution, where we say the 1963 Constitution had all the powers on the president. Sovereignty was on the president. It was not actually, but because we feared the institution of the presidency was the commander-in-chief, which previously was not. The institution of the president was the head of government, which previously was not. And then we've carried those hangovers, and we still do not know how to exercise our sovereignty. That's why we start by asking ourselves, what makes us Kenyan? And after that, we start asking, what makes us sovereign? We have not understood how to exercise sovereignty. The king and queen are usually trained from birth. This is how you behave. These are your rights. These are your responsibilities. And then when you get to the position of becoming the king or queen, this is how you exercise sovereignty. We are never taught that. So that's why it becomes a problem for us today to start saying, how do we exercise that sovereignty? Because no one has trained us from birth that we are a sovereign. And then this is how you grow.
Do you think it's in our leaders' interest to make people aware of their sovereignty?
It is not in their interest.
Oh, sorry, not leaders. I was corrected on the show. Politicians.
I'm glad you went that way. Because I was about to say, it is the politicians actually.
Yes.
Because it's not in their interest. Because you'll find, even in the government protocols, we always start with the president, the deputy president, the speaker.
All protocols.
Right. And then who do you normally say as the last one?
Na nyinyi wananchi.
Na wananchi wa kawaida. Now that wananchi wa kawaida is an illegal term if you ask me. It's unconstitutional. There is nowhere it is said wananchi wa kawaida, raia, mtu wa kawaida, those kind of terms. And you see, if you were to call the queen raia or the king raia, what would happen? People will frown at you. Yes. You're being disrespectful to the crown. But in Kenya,
we are the crown.
Exactly. We are the crown.
So you should start with us.
Start with the sovereign, then the president.
Yes.
Right. Never put the sovereign last. In fact, one of the things I wish to see is that all the government protocols for meetings held by government in Kenya or outside start with the sovereigns of Kenya, the president, go that way. Never say mwananchi wa kawaida, never say citizens in general, never say raia. That one is now being disrespectful to the sovereigns. That would be my...
Good.
Right.
Nice. At least nikienda mkutano naanza sovereign.
Sovereign. In fact, when I'm in the airport,
yes,
and I'm presenting my passport, if I'm presenting it to Canadian officials or whoever, I always say, this is a sovereign passport. They always look at me like, what does that mean?
But they look at you like, what is wrong with this
right.
man?
But I'm asserting my right as a sovereign.
Yes.
I'm asserting that I am a sovereign. Essentially, I'm saying that me and the king, me and the queen,
we are equal.
We are equal. We are sovereigns. I'm a sovereign.
Nataka to travel UK. So I go there, I'm like, this is a
sovereign passport.
Then if they ask, what does it mean? It means me and your queen. We are equal.
Like this.
Hey,
yeah.
Man, that's the power we have.
It is.
That's the power our constitution has given us.
Yep.
Then why do we feel so inferior?
Now, that's what I was saying. We still have the hangovers of
1963
constitution.
Yeah.
And allow me to also just dive into that point. Yes. There was a time whoever was the head of government, or let me start from here. Let me start with the head of state. There was a time we had a head of state who was not the head of government. You know that.
Yes.
We had the Queen, or even had the King George. They were the heads of state of this, what we call Kenya. But they were not heads of government. Prime Minister was the head of government. In the same token, there was a time we had a commander-in-chief who was not head of state and head of government. His name was General Askin. So this was during the Mau Mau. So we had a commander-in-chief of Kenya who was not the head of state, was not the head of government, and was not the president. What am I saying? It's time as Kenyans, with this new constitution we have, we revisit the reason we have bestowed the powers of commander-in-chief
to the president,
to the presidency, the power of the head of government to the presidency. We need, in fact, what I'm saying is that we need to split those functions. We need to have a head of state, and we need to have a head of government.
I agree.
And we need to have a commander-in-chief. All of those responsible to the sovereigns.
Yes.
And not bestow all these powers into one
person.
The reason we bestowed those powers into one person comes after 1963. So we had a situation where Jomo Kenyatta, in fact, the first head of government, African, do you remember who it was?
The first?
Head of government.
In
Kenya. First African head of government was Ronald Ngala. Right. First head of government. Not even Jomo Kenyatta. But somehow history has taught us to always think it must have been Jomo Kenyatta. It wasn't. It was Ronald Ngala. Now, if we had, and the reason I'm pointing this out is that this was after the 1960 constitution that said, okay, we are going to give you Africans or you Kenyans your independence. So there was agitation for who becomes. Kenyatta is in prison. Ronald Ngala becomes head of government. And that's how we started out. But there was tension between Ronald Ngala and Jomo Kenyatta. And it persisted for years. Only that history books never talk about it. But there was a time that Jomo Kenyatta, as chairman of KANU, went to preside over elections in, was it Kilifi or Kwale, where Ronald Ngala was coming from. He went to preside over the elections himself, just to see that Ronald Ngala does not become the coast KANU kingpin. But nevertheless, he won those elections, even when Jomo Kenyatta was presiding over them.
Whoa.
There was that kind of tension.
Whoa.
So history will also raise the question that, was the accident Ronald Ngala had, was it actually an accident?
Oh,
Because
an assassination.
right, the question arose that, or the story eventually came out, that the driver who was driving Ronald Ngala on that day said a swarm of bees came into the car and he had to swerve to try and shake them off. And that's how they ended up rolling. He survived. Ronald Ngala did not have a seatbelt. He didn't die immediately. He was hospitalized. But he was a diabetic. Diabetics and blood loss don't go together. So he was in hospital for some time. And he went into a coma. And eventually, even with the best doctors brought in from Canada, he passed on. So the question arose then, was that an orchestrated accident? But when you look at the history of Kenya, there have been so many coincidental accidents, especially during that time. And these coincidental accidents then raise the question, were some of them accidents or are some of them assassinations? Recently is when I've seen conversations about the first African barrister. Many people like to make reference to Njonjo, but Awings Kodek was the one, first African barrister from Kenya. And many people also say, not even many people, it's been recorded in the book by Fitz D'Souza. Fitz D'Souza served as deputy speaker some time in the past. And when Jomo Kenyatta was going through his tribulations in Kapenguria, Fitz D'Souza was one of the lawyers, together with Dennis Pritt, Awings Kodek, that went to represent him in those trials. So Fitz D'Souza said, in his view, he had expected someone like Awings Kodek to be named as Attorney General and not Charles Njonjo. So you can see that there was also that lingering competition. Awings Kodek, of course, was replaced by Tom Mboya, went in competition with Tom Mboya for a parliamentary seat, and he lost. But you can see that history, Awings Kodek was quite an outspoken gentleman. And when he passed on, accounts say, on what is Awings Kodek Road today, accounts say that he said he had a loud bang. And he was telling this to Mr. Omanga. Mr. Omanga was it a permanent secretary, or he was telling that to him. He had a loud bang, and then there he was on the road. And then he passed on. Accounts say there was a short heard. That place used to be bushy. It was almost like a forested area. It's not as built up as it is today. So those are some examples that I'm putting across to, even in the book, to say some of these assassinations that we have had in the past, were they, or some of these accidents
that we've told were accidents, were
were they really accidents? So those are some examples.
Do you know then what was the relationship then between Gama Pinto and Malcolm X?
Gama Pinto and Malcolm X. So there's a gentleman called, is it Gregory Dix?
Yes.
is quoted very prominently on some video clip saying at the same time Malcolm X was dying is the same time Gama Pinto was dying. They died at different times. So they died in the same year, but different,
days.
Even months.
Yeah.
So let's start by knocking that off. But there's a clip that circulates on the internet. People have not really paid attention to, but was recorded at KBC. Malcolm X was being interviewed at KBC. So Malcolm X was in Kenya. Malcolm X was a prominent guest of the state during that time of Pan-Africanism, because Africa had the OAU. Malcolm X was trying to put an organization of African American, same as OAU, but called the Organization of African American Unity, right? So he was trying to put that organization together and trying to hedge that organization to the OAU, so that he was even invited to a private tour session of the OAU, and even made a presentation to various presidents. You know, what we normally see in plenary is not everything.
Yes.
And in fact, that most of activities take place outside of plenary. So Malcolm X was meeting with the presidents, canvassing his position, saying, African Americans, we are suffering. Can you, as the Organization of African Unity, champion our cause for human rights in? It culminated in a resolution of the OAU, writing or calling for human rights to be observed by the American government. And that one is also recorded in history. One bit of history that has not come out very openly is that Malcolm X was poisoned during that session, OAU session. So Malcolm X was there, had his food with the African presidents away during that session, had his food, and then he fell ill and he had to be hospitalized. The aspect of him being ill was kept secret, but there was actually an attempt to kill him by poison. I think FBI was the culprit in that instance, was named as a culprit in that instance, and it is documented that it actually happened. And Malcolm X was targeted for elimination at that time. Now, I bring up that aspect of history of Malcolm X to bring it up to Gama Pinto. So with those activities of Malcolm X with the African Unity, or OAU, he did come to Kenya. He did spend time in Kenya, but it was kept hidden for various reasons. The Kenyatta government did not want the allies to know that they are supporting Malcolm X's cause. But privately, and including Dr. Nyerere, they were actually supporting Malcolm X. They just didn't want it to be known openly. Wow. So even him coming to Kenya was a hidden notion, and the clips circulating were recorded at KBC, our Kenyan broadcaster.
Now be back VOK.
Yes, and he was talking about a presidential candidate in the US at that time. I'm forgetting his name most immediately, but he was saying there is no difference between the two candidates. So if you ever get, I'll make the reference to it later and share with you, but if you ever see a clip where Malcolm X is talking about the difference between the Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate in the 1960s for election, according to him, there was no difference. That clip was recorded here in Kenya. Right? So Kenya has been playing a pivotal role in some of these world happenings. Very much.
Sisi ni OG.
Right. Some of it hidden, some of it covert, some of it overt, but nevertheless, Kenya has been playing that role. So in those interactions, it's likely they did interact with Pio Gama Pinto. Of course, records are not available to show how much they interacted or what they did, but their cause was social justice. And you can see right there is a nexus and potential reasons for them to have met and interacted. Pio Gama Pinto, his assassination today is claimed or is said happened because he had a disagreement with the Kenyatta government, but people really don't know what the disagreement was about. So Pio Gama Pinto came across something, the Z-plot scheme. So the Z-plot scheme was people are going to be given 100 acres of land in a farm, 100 acres of land, farm with workers, implements, and a house. So this is a Z-plot, another Z-plot. So there were 100 acres each. The British government had provided the Kenya government with money for that arrangement. It was called the Million Acre Scheme. So in the Million Acre Scheme, land was to be bought back from the crown or from the settlers. And then we, the Africans, were going to get that land. And then that money was going to be provided as a loan to the Kenya government. We, the Africans, take up the land. The settlers are repaid with that money. And then we repay that money that was given to us. It's a long scheme, long process. But Pio Gama Pinto then discovered these Z plots. Some of these beneficiaries, PSs, cabinet ministers, ambassadors.
Same old.
The government people. And he also discovered Jomo Kenyatta has quite some sizable land in this scheme. And he was going to table a motion in Parliament of no confidence. Story goes, he was supported by Jaramogi Odinga. Go ahead.
Kijana.
Put it in. We will back you. And then Jomo Kenyatta got wind of it. And they met in the precincts of Parliament. And Jomo Kenyatta attacked Pio Gama Pinto. He used some choice word on him, which I allude to in the book. And Pio Gama Pinto retaliated by calling him the same word. And people who were seated at a distance, because you know in Parliament, I'm sure you've seen how the Parliament is. And back then it was even, people are more intimate and closer. In the not in plenary, but in the gardens and other sitting areas where they usually sit. And then Pio Gama Pinto, having reacted with that, people were asking him, how comes you called Jomo Kenyatta that word? And he said, he called me that word first. And that, as series of events go, people say that disagreement is what led to the assassination. But I always say, let's take a second look. Was that really the reason that he called him that word? Or was it this other Z-plot scheme? Because when Pio Gama Pinto died, the Z-plot scheme story also
died.
No one has ever talked about Z-plot scheme since then.
Wow. So the land has never been ours.
It has never been ours. The land has always been ours.
Yes. But
various, remember the analogy I gave you of the 200 shilling note? So let me use that example again. So you're given an ordinance, then you're given something else, then you're given this is that. So you have various acts on land that obscure what the initial intention for that land was. Right.
All right. Now going back to land.
Sure.
I was shocked to just, discover Laikipia count in itself.
Right.
Half of it is owned by foreigners. We are talking about millions and millions of acres of land. How does that happen?
Right.
And is it okay? We are far-fetching.
Is it okay? We are far-fetching. That's why I started by asking the question, do we start in the 1st century? Do we start in 1884? Do we start in 1905? So now let me take you to 1905. We are well aware of the history of 1884.
Yes.
The 1884 is the scramble and partition of Africa. The Kaiser and Otto von Bismarck invite the European nations to a meeting, and they say, let us stop this fighting in Europe, because we are always fighting. One power rises, another falls. So let us stop fighting here. And it's all about resources and land and all that. There's untapped land in Africa. Let us go there and take for ourselves as much as we can, and we'll respect each other's territory there. That we remember, scramble and partition.
Yes.
So 1884. By 1895, the British had set themselves up as a potential power in East Africa. So that now what they wanted to do was assert their rights. So Queen Victoria grants the Imperial British East Africa Company a charter to take over the East Africa, what became the East Africa Protectorate. By 1900, okay, I'll keep flowing with that, because I also wanted to tell you some intrigues that occurred around 1897. Jews were actually supposed to be settled in Kenya. You've heard that story.
Yes.
Jews were to be settled in a place called the ofUS&UK Plateau. So ofUS&UK would have been home of the Jews, but we'll come back to it. Let me continue with this narrative. With the charter, Imperial British East Africa Company sets itself, establishes someone called a commissioner. So the commissioner that was established in Kenya, or the territory called East Africa, under protectorate, was under the commissioner called Sir Charles Eliot. So Charles Eliot comes in as commissioner. Later that title evolved to become governor. But Charles Eliot comes in. He is the commissioner. Charles Eliot then starts going round the country or around the territory to understand who are the people that inhabit this place. Which are the areas that we can probably have as settlement areas for some of our British nationals. So he goes around the country and even writes a book called The East Africa, is it Protectorate or the East African Protectorate? He writes a book. That's a book that I would encourage everyone to read. A gentleman called Delamere was then in 1887, about 17 years old, had inherited the barony of Cheshire in England. But they were running broke because to maintain that estate required money and there was no revenues coming in. And his parents have died, and 17 years, how do you raise money to maintain such a huge estate? He decides to take a break and come hunting in East Africa. He enters East Africa through Eritrea because that was the most popular entry point then. Treks with his friend called Dr. Atkinson, hunting, exploring these jungle in Africa. Ends up entering what we call today's territory of Kenya through Lake Rudolph. You know where Lake Rudolph is? Okay, Lake Rudolph used to be called, that is what it used to be called. Today it is called Lake Turkana. So he enters through there with Dr. Atkinson, his friend, and they trek all the way, just exploring and seeing what is this land about. You know, open country, no visa, just walk in as explorers. Goes through the place called Laikipia, sees all that land as it's coming all the way down, and then meets with administrators of the East Africa Protectorate. And one of the administrators is called Ainsworth. Ainsworth invites him I think Ainsworth was living in Machakos, or generally that area, which was dry and dusty. Invites him to dinner. Delamere says, apologies, I cannot come because I do not have the attire for dinner. Remember, this is Lord Delamere. And you see, lords, even back then, were held in high esteem, as they are today, right? Today it's not so much open, but if you land in the British system, you will understand just how esteemed anyone holding the title Lord so-and-so are held. So Lord Delamere makes his way with Dr. Atkinson, sees this land, then says, this is a good place. But he's still 17, retreats back to England, gets there, reestablishes his life, gets married, makes a trip with his wife, Lady Cole. They come to Mombasa, formally. Come into the country, meet the commissioner, Sir Charles Elliot. Sir Charles Elliot says, I'll give you all this land in Njoro for 8 pennies per acre if you develop it in 5 years' time. How much land? I'll give you 100,000 acres, all of it, for 8 pennies per. Lord Delamere says, I will not take it. But of course, you know, he didn't have the money. I will not take it. But he makes arrangements. Remember, he's a lord. He makes arrangements with the not home secretary, but the secretary in charge of colonies. The official documentation is not readily available, but he receives a concession of 99 years, 100,000 acres in Njoro. And that's how Lord Delamere then gets all that land around Naivasha, Njoro. He even grants his brother-in-law, Lord Egerton, some 30,000 acres. And that's where the Egerton Castle, Egerton University is built up under that patronage. In time, so this is the 1900s, so here's that land. In time, a commission is then set up that says, let us look at all this land in all this territory and then mark it out and say, which is crown land, which land is to be done this or that with. And they invite petitions from various interested stakeholders. About 40-something stakeholders submit their petitions. Most of them are settlers. But the settlers are the ones that submit petitions to that land commission. But here's the intrigue. When that land commission is set up, there are about 3 judges at the time, 2 members of an organization called the Colonist Association of British East Africa. You'll be surprised, there was an organization like that formally registered, Colonist Association of British East Africa. Lord Delamere was a member, and so many others. Many of the things or institutions or even the currency that we have today as a Kenya shilling was a formation of a petition written by that Colonist Association. The Colonist Association was the one that determined so many things about the process of colonizing East Africa. And this is documented meticulously. Their petition is available for anyone with an interest in history to read, but I've also captured it in the book. Mm-hmm. So the Colonist Association then writes a petition to demand certain rights But before I get deep into that, let me just walk you slowly through what happened, the intrigues I'm referring to. So there were 3 judges, 2 members of the Colonies Association in that land committee. One of the judges, he was called Judge Keita. He was then appointed as the chairman of that land commission to review all this territory and make recommendations as to how it will be used, what areas will be reserved for what. And Judge Keita is then transferred to Zanzibar to go to the High Court there. And who is appointed chairman in his place? Lord Delamere. Lord Delamere was a very influential person. He could influence, I'm not putting it aside that he could influence the transfer of a judge
To Zanzibar.
so that he becomes
Yes.
the chairman of that commission.
Yes.
So as the chairman of that commission, he then has authority to make allocations, give land here and there. There was an, let me call it organization, quote unquote, called the Syndicate that was allocated 300,000 acres. And you ask yourself, who is this syndicate? It still remains unknown, but I'm sure somewhere in the records, that is information that will be found. That's when people like Grogan, Ewart Grogan, start getting thousands of acres of land and starts decimating a forest somewhere that we know today, and became those big people. The point I'm making is, when Lord Delamere was putting together that land commission, Africans or Kenyans, as we know today, remember I told you about 40-something people put in petitions?
Yeah.
None was African. There were some Asians and maybe Arab, but there was no African who was consulted in that process that gave away all these chunks of land. That's when he established, or Lord Delamere established the concession that he got for all the land that he had, and was then able to give it out as he wished. Lord Delamere played a big role in carving out chunks of land in this country.
We're gonna need a breather. Wait, what?
Right. There you go.
No African, no
Was
Kenyan, no nothing.
no
But that's now
African.
pre-independence, right?
That is in the 1905.
Yes.
Right. So, and that's why I bring it up. It's important because, you know, many people, when they talk about Ndungu Land Commission, they always say, let us start at 1963 when we gained independence. I say, no. Let us go back to 1905. Let us not stop at 1905, because when Lord Delamere and the British colonists came, they found a certain system working. So I'm saying, let us even go back to 1832, when Said was coming to Zanzibar.
Yes.
Because that is what formed the basis of people entering the hinterland. Because Mombasa was the first capital of this territory. Mombasa is where the high courts were, is where for the house, the taxes were collected. Everything was there. So that is the starting point. So let us start by, how did the Sultan of Zanzibar gain land here? And then the British found that this is the model they are using. They latched onto it and came with it to the hinterland. And coming onto the hinterland, then they say, let us use the Ceylon. Ceylon is Sri Lanka or Bangladesh? Let us use the Ceylon Treaty, how we use that model there.
Yes.
To gain land in. So put in ordinances, ordinance for this, ordinance for that. And those are what has caused the land challenges we have in Kenya.
Okay.
Right.
So now, legally, is it okay to ask people to leave?
Legally, is it?
Or legally, how are these people protected to stay?
Right.
Because we are looking at a whole count. I don't know. I don't want to say what I want to say, but
Okay. Say it so that we can address it.
We are looking at a whole county
Okay.
where half of the landowners
Right.
are foreigners.
Right.
And not just 1 acre. We are talking about millions
Millions
of acres, right?
Right.
Then you have this community around you. They must be feeling some type
Right.
of way.
Right.
This could even potentially be a trigger to
Right.
this community. So, what's the solution? That's what I wanted
What's the
to
solution?
ask. What's the
Right.
solution?
Right.
Or what could we have done that we have not done
Right.
and needs to be done?
Right. So, and I like that you raise that because I address it in the book.
Yes.
Towards the closing sections, I say we need to have a conversation about land. The conversation should be of the following nature. We need to have something like the same way we had the bombers of 2005 to talk about the Constitution. We need to have a similar setting, not necessarily convening at Bomas of Kenya, where all of us convene there and we cannot all be accommodated at Bomas. And usually, that's what politicians latch on by saying, we can't have everyone here. So select
your people.
Select 2-3 people,
Yes.
come. Then, government has a way of using bureaucracy to condense issues. You give them 1,000 demands. They say, okay, now let us look at this and this. They look similar. So let us combine this and that. Let us have 5 things that you can put on the table. So bureaucracies condense issues. In the condensation of issues is where important matters
Are thrown out.
You see the way we had something very progressive called Nyumba Kumi that was quickly discarded because some people thought those heads of the Nyumba Kumi sections were going to become powerhouses of their own. And then we as councillors, MCAs, we were going to lose our grassroots power. Chiefs were going to lose their power. Because if you have Nyumba Kumi of 200 people, they become more powerful than your provincial administration. So that, in my assessment, that had to be put to a stop because power was going to go to the people and was no longer going to be centered around officials, offices, and government appointees. So they had to, in my assessment, they had to let that one just die out quickly. But I'm saying that model, we can put it to effective use and say, where does our representation start? Our foundational level of representation is at the ward level. So how many people are in a ward? From elective calculation, we say about 5 to 10,000. Could be more in some places. But I'm saying in those wards, as we have seen in polling stations by IEBC and the electoral system, those polling stations establish that so many people in a polling station can form, so many people form a polling station and there's a maximum cap. So we use the same model and say we'll have the equivalent of polling station. People vote in their neighborhoods, right? So in your neighborhood, you have a church, you have a school. The people in one estate convene at that and discuss one question: land in our area, representation in our area. You draw a resolution. That resolution is at ward level. You amalgamate what is in the wards. This ward say this about land, this ward say that about land, and you gather all those views. On land, this is what the sovereigns were saying. On another issue, this is what they were saying. Amalgamate them and then say nationally, people said this on land. Take your time, there's no rush. Take even a year, 2, 3 years, collect all those views, and then look at each one. Don't condense. Let Lynn's views be recorded. Lynn said this about land. Lawi said this about land. Then you'll get a picture of what the whole nation said on one topic, land. And it's possible in this day and age. We don't have to all convene at Bomas. We can do it at our neighborhoods, villages. You know, there are various public squares that people can convene. Bunge la Mwananchi. There are churches in the neighborhood. There are schools in the neighborhood. Those are public, even if they are private grounds. But we have public grounds that can be provided for people from estates to meet, submit their views. Most of the land in Nairobi, not Nairobi, in Kenya, was allocated by Lord Delamere and his committee.
Do you think there is hope?
There is hope when we are socially conscious. When the information is presented to you, when you look at it, and that's why I liked, in fact, I reached out to you because I came across the interview you did with Mordecai and Mbaria. And I saw how it opened my eyes, because I was doing some studies some time ago, and I understand that Nairobi has Precambrian rock. Precambrian rock is like, if you go into geology, some of the oldest forms of rock. And you find that there are other places where they have rock that is not as old as we have Kavirondo or Nyanzian. Or now you're going into deep geology that way. And they have minerals. And where we have the oldest rock, there is no minerals at all. And I said, okay, this is interesting. But when I came across the Mordecai and Mbaria interview, I said, I had seen this book, but I never paid attention because I thought it was just talking about wildlife and all that.
Yes.
But when I came across it, that's when it opened my eyes and I said, there's something here to be learnt.
I'm really interested in something you said because it caught my attention, and I wanted you to tell, what's the Mackenziean blueprint?
Sure.
What does that mean?
Sure. So the Mackenziean blueprint, I say, is the same analogy I used with you there. Some things are hidden. You may look at the note.
Yes.
This is a note. You see it at face value as it is. But when you hold it against the light, that's when you start to see there are other things in there that you might not have paid attention to. So Mackenziean blueprint has two facets to it. There's a Mackenziean corporatism, and then there's a Mackenziean cartelization.
Yes.
So the Mackenziean blueprint, we all know what a blueprint is.
Yeah.
I want to build a house. This is the blueprint. It's a drawing of what is. And then from there evolves everything that we now know as a house. So the Mackenziean blueprint, essentially, I'm saying, is the foundational level for understanding what the trouble of Kenya is.
Yes.
And then I'm saying it has two facets to it: the corporatism and the cartelization. Mackenziean cartelization I define as a set of events that benefit a special interest group. And then Mackenziean corporatism I define as activities that skew market fundamentals. So things are happening, houses are being built, high rises are coming up, but you look at what Kenyans are saying on a day-to-day basis, there is no money in Kenya. But how are these high rises coming up in Kilimani, in Isili, in many other places that we know, when there is no money in circulation? What is skewing these happenings? That is what I'm referring to as the Mackenziean corporatism. And I'm using that to say, if you then read the book, you'll see from a historical perspective, how some of these things are coming into being today. Today we are firefighting and saying, let's do this bill to curb this, let's do that bill to curb that. We are firefighting. While in essence, what you have to do is take a back step and say, what is it that we can do that will solve all these things? And I'm going back to the initial conversation, the failure of citizenry. When the citizenry is well informed about its rights, knows its responsibilities, then the aspect of sovereignty will flow without, remember, no one teaches us the way the king and queen is taught from childhood. This is how you hold the knife and fork. This is how you sit as a royal. This is how, no one teaches us that as sovereigns. So we are on the back foot, but we can start by being socially conscious, then teaching ourselves, having conversations like you're always holding here. Those will encourage that thought process.
Yes.
Then the day the decision making comes, as a sovereign, you'll be ready to do it. Right.
Beautiful. I love the fact that there's also a comic book.
Okay.
That's beautiful. This, you love art, eh?
Yes. So essentially you'll notice that the book
Yes.
is all in text form.
Yes.
The comic is then in pictorial form.
Yeah.
A book like this, someone who is 10 years old will look at it and say, overwhelming. And even adults of our age will look at it and say, this is overwhelming. But the comic book is about 64 pages.
Yes.
It gives you some highlights or summary of the history. And actually it starts, if you look at chapter 1, it starts with the Zanj. So we also start by asking the question. In fact, this is another point I could quickly mention. Do you know what the Indian Ocean was called before it was called the Indian Ocean?
Baharia Ocean.
Baharia Ocean.
I'm just kidding with you, Lana. No, of course.
Okay. So it used to be called Bahar al-Zanj.
Oh, no. I was almost somewhere.
Almost there. Almost
I
there.
should have trusted myself more.
Trust your instincts.
Come
So,
on.
Bahar al-Zanj.
Yes.
So Bahar, you know what it is?
Yes.
Bahari. Al-Zanj, of the Zanj.
Oh.
So you can already see there was already some reference. Interestingly, and this is what is also hidden in the Arabian world. In the year 1859 or thereabout, 859, not even 18, 859, the Zanj ruled over a place called Basra for about 15 years. The Zanj are the dark-skinned people Pliny was referring to.
Yes.
These dark-skinned people came from East Africa. And many in the Arabian world will not want to accept that at one point we were ruled by the Zanj, or the dark-skinned people. But it is there in history.
It is there.
It is there. 15 years.
15 years. I'm
Right.
loving our history.
Right.
Beautiful. I see here there is a book you're reading that I'm also about to read.
Okay.
But I love
let me make quick reference to that
The
book.
Betrayal of the Mau Mau,
Betrayal of
Freedom
the Mau Mau.
Fighters by Gitu
So,
Akahengeri.
right. This book I chanced upon
Yeah.
recently, and I've been reading it, and it confirmed certain things
Yes.
firsthand from a Mau Mau perspective. And in my book, The Trouble with Kenya, I also make reference to,
Yes.
there's a section I make a lot of reference to the Mau Mau. And this book confirmed a lot of those things. There's in fact, if you get to the pictorial section of this book by Gitu Akahengeri,
Yeah.
you will see there's a Mzungu gentleman he pays a lot of tribute to, called Nottingham. Nottingham was, I don't know if it was a district commissioner,
Yeah.
but he was a Mzungu administrator who did not like how Africans were being treated in Kenya. And he provided Gitu Akahengeri and the Mau Mau freedom fighters support when they went to raise a case in the UK for compensation.
Yeah.
So we had some good Wazungus
Yes.
whose conscience was pinched by what was happening during that period of colonialism.
Yes.
So
Good.
I chanced upon this book and I said, it does confirm certain things. What I find that Gitu Kaingeri is very careful, doesn't want to name certain people in certain instances. But in my book, I've made reference to the time he was a member of parliament, because I also made reference to him. He was a member of parliament and he lost the elections, was it by 200 or 2,000 votes to Peter Muigai Kenyatta in, is it Juja? But they are where he was a member of parliament. So he lost. He does not want to admit it, but he was rigged that time. I think not that he doesn't want to admit it, he doesn't say it directly.
Yes.
But
We
yeah,
have no
the
problem
account is
saying it
right,
on his behalf.
Right. There you go, exactly.
We have no problem saying that
it
on your behalf.
Right.
I love this. Honestly, I feel like we are going to have you for a couple of more episodes, because I feel like what we've done, we've just touched on everything.
Right.
But I feel like we could narrow down now to specifics.
We could go granular.
Granular, you know, so that people can be. I love that we are in a digital, you know.
Right.
This is also a digital platform where our children can be able to come back later on and just refer to some of these things.
Right.
But let's talk about where can people get this very beautiful. I must really commend you for the artwork. It's really amazing. The quality. I am loving our Kenyan authors. Man, they are going hard on quality, on me, and I love that we even as a people have started appreciating reading our own work. So that's, I must commend you on the cover. It's really beautiful. But for anyone who would want to maybe, I always say, no one has paid me to have you guys on my platform, but it's because I know, they said they hide it in books. It's time for us now to read those books. So where can people find this beautiful book?
Right. So I published the book when I was out of the country.
Yes.
Then certain realities struck me that getting this book from my publisher or from the publishing to the country involves a lot. I discussed people as I was sharing the word with family, friends, and putting it on social media. People are telling me, if you go to Amazon, your book is there.
Yeah.
But do you know the price to ship that book?
Yeah.
Is almost double
the price of the
book.
Good.
So I discovered that is what is happening. But so first step, the book is available on Amazon.
Yes.
So if you go to Amazon, you can order the book. It works well for people who are in diaspora because they don't incur those shipping
costs.
I'm surprised we do not have an Amazon branch in Kenya, because that would have made the book locally available very cheaply. We do not have. That's a problem. So what we did again next is that we said, let us make the book available as an ebook and also as an audiobook.
Yes.
So you'll find the ebook and audiobook on Google Play. Or is it Play Google? Google Play.
Yes.
So the book is available on Google Play. On Amazon, it's about $27.
Yeah.
On Google Play as an ebook, it comes to you at about $4.
Okay.
That to me, I think is very attainable.
Good.
For someone who is interested in this history of Kenya.
All right.
So
beautiful.
That is
yes, I appreciate you, honestly.
Allow me to talk about the other two, if you don't mind.
I am so sorry.
Okay. Unless you are saving them for the next.
No, I'm not. Okay. But if you want us to save them for the next, we can.
Okay.
But
I
if
can
you
quickly mention
want to touch about, here we have the colorized history and Ravel mysteries. We can touch Ramani ya Mackenzie.
Sure.
Yes.
So the one you're holding, colorized history, it's you can see when you open it, it's all black and white.
Yes.
It's a coloring book.
Yes.
The idea is for the young ones to also start.
It's colorized, not colorized. Colorized history.
So it's for the young ones to also start coloring, get a color pencil and color the book.
Yeah.
If you want to make reference, then you have the comic book to see what colors and how to shade. And then the Ramani ya Mackenzie is a Swahili version. And if you open it, you'll see I've tried to colorize
Yes,
the initial pages,
yes.
just to illustrate that this is how you can color.
Good.
So that is what it is.
Yeah.
So it's a Swahili version,
Yes.
and we're also trying to promote Swahili.
Good.
Because as I said, we have a heritage. Number one, we're not promoting our sovereignty. Number two, we have a heritage of Swahili which we have just been sitting on. And we need to promote Swahili as our, in fact, I'll be happy to see you conduct an interview in Swahili, full Swahili, from beginning to end.
Hiyo itakuja, mimi nakuahidi. Hiyo yaja, nitakuahidi.
Tashukuru.
Nitakuahidi.
So, Lynn, allow me to share something with you.
Okay.
I've been talking to you about sovereignty and social consciousness. Remember, I mentioned I'm a social consciousness theorist.
Yes.
So along that line, then I said, if people are to remember consciously, you know, the reason some people say, in fact, I was talking to a friend who said, in Hinduism, I was asking him, how is it that in the Hindu religion you have idols in your shops, in your homes? And he told me, actually, they do not believe, once your consciousness rises to a certain level, you keep the idols away and you start focusing on one God. But you want that idol there as a reference point to always remind you, you're doing your things and you look at that idol, you can see God is looking at me.
Yeah.
But when you get to a certain point of consciousness, then the idol ceases to be a reminder. So here I have a silicone, we can call it a,
Yes.
It's a silicone wristband. And if you look at it, it will have, all right, it will have the inscriptions sovereign and socially conscious.
I love that.
All right. So the idea is, well, as you wear it, it becomes a reminder that I am a sovereign. Let it be a reminder until the day you will walk as a sovereign without having to need to wear it. So in the same line, then we have a button pin. So if you wear that button pin,
this will look nice.
all right,
Yes,
and for kids, for yourself, depending on what you feel like, that becomes your reminder that you are a sovereign. Remember, sovereignty is not about being 18 years and above. Any child even born in Kenya today is a sovereign.
Good.
The difference is that there's a right and there's a responsibility. That child has a right, but they do not have the responsibilities of being a sovereign. As a sovereign, you pay your taxes, you observe the laws, all those. A child is under guardianship. So they're a sovereign, but they have the rights, not the responsibility. That's the difference.
Good.
In the
Looks
same,
good.
all right.
Okay.
In the same token, we have something here which is a pepper-scented car freshener or room freshener, depending on where you want to put it. So if you put that in your car, what you'll be smelling is the scent of sovereignty.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So those are some of the things I thought to help, aside from the books, to help our fellow Kenyans appreciate the aspect of sovereignty. Then we bring about this, we call them tokens or manifestations of sovereignty. Until the consciousness is built, then you'll say, I do not need to wear the badge anymore, the wristband. And then you just walk like a sovereign. When you present your passport, you say, this is
a sovereign
passport. There you go.
Right.
So even the crew will get the same.
Beautiful.
Right.
Thank you.
We'd like them to spread that message out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Maybe we'll put some over here.
Sure.
So that we are always being reminded.
And then when we make these books available, I will also make sure you get copies.
Good.
You can add them to the shelf.
We can add them.
Right. These are my evaluation copies. It's the ones I go around with. But once we produce more,
no pressure,
you certainly have one of the first.
Good.
Right.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
It's been an honor.
Same here.
I'm loving these conversations. As I said, I love being on the right side of history. Because, hey, mambo ni mengi, masaa ni machache.
Right.
Mambo ni mengi, masaa ni machache. How can people find you?
How can people find me? So on social media, I use Sama Ismela.
Good.
On Twitter. Sama Ismela is SAMAISMELA. What does Sama Ismela mean? It's in the book. If you
Find
read
out.
the book, you will know what Sama Ismaila means. So I use that for social consciousness. I use my own name for agronomy things which people may not find relevant.
Yes.
But for social consciousness, I use Sama Ismaila.
All right.
Right.
Good. Thank you so much for taking time and awakening our conscience. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful journey to be in, and I'm loving it. And I can't wait to see other people that will grace our set and just have these conversations, because as I said, one story at a time. One story at a time. Shall we wind up?
Sure.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Oh, God, I know we are learning. It feels nice. By the way, let me tell you, may look forward to these conversations, because every day I get to learn a thing or two. And I think that's what the essence of these shows is, to be able to learn something, to be able to know your history, to be able to go back and look for these books and want to just educate yourself, guys, so that when time comes, kila mtu anajua, why am I saying this? Why am I walking the way I'm walking? Why am I talking the way I'm talking? Why am I landless in a country where so many people have millions of acres of land? But anyways, si tutaendelea na hizi story. Yeah. Looking forward. Thank you so much for the love once again that you guys have given our platform. I do not take it for granted. Thank you for 1 million plus subscribers. You guys are the real, oh man, you've done it and we appreciate it. I've often said, unaweza pika chakula na watu wasikule. So I don't take it for granted that every time we sit here and have conversations, you guys, you partake in the meal. I don't take it for granted. Let me know who else you would love to see on the show. And if you are watching this and you would also want to appear on the show, info@lnn.digital. That's where you can be able to find us. Send us a brief of what you would want to talk about, so that the team can look at it and we'll definitely get back to you. May think we've done a good job today on today's conversation, but as always, your feedback is very important. On the comment section, let me know what your take home has been, and also where to get these books. Once again, will be pinned on the comment section. The link to Amazon will also be there. And also, once again, mtuambie what has been your take home. Probably I'll see you tomorrow. God bless. Bye-bye.